Good morning. It is a fabulously cold morning here in the Ohio. It is about, let's see, 48 degrees according to my weather app. And here we are. It's your good buddy Spider. And this is Sippin Coffee with Spider. Your favorite new morning news show. Is it still new? I've had this going for what, 2 months, maybe? Month and a half? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many episodes I have of this daily. Maybe it's just a month. I don't know. I'll have to go back and take a look. But what are we going to do? I said it's the morning news, so we're going to check out the morning news. So let's do that. Tech Raptor with some gaming news. The development of Second Extinction is being shut down as it did not achieve success. Now, this was an interesting game that I was kind of into. I didn't play it, but I was like, I'm kind of into this kind of thing. I love dinosaurs and like fighting dinosaur games and all kinds of other stuff like that. And it looked promising, but I didn't play it because it was, I believe, multiplayer only. And I thought maybe eventually they'd have like private servers or something. But it looks like I guess I missed my chance because the team at Systemic Reaction announced that it's ending development of its dinosaur shooter Second Extinction, which never left early access. And that's a pretty bad sign. The developers mentioned that while the game was well loved by players, it did not achieve the success they hoped, and some show-stopping issues made it miss the previously announced fall release date. So, I guess if you were into that, that's disappointing news for you. If you didn't get a chance to try it like I didn't, well, that's disappointing news for us. And if you never bothered with it and you didn't care, well, guess you don't care. Moving on to some world news here. From Washington Post World, North Korea may be sending arms to Russia for Ukraine war, images suggest. And they have a little set of pictures on the blurb here showing a set of ships looking like they're departing from different North Korean locations. I'd love to read the story because, I have thoughts about it, but Washington Post is paywalled, so I can't. But it's got to be only token stuff because North Korea doesn't have anything. All they have is their rocket program, which takes up all of their money. Their people are starving to death. They fertilize their fields with their own feces. They have almost nothing. Everything is concentrated in the hands of the ruling elite family, and I can't imagine that they can send Russia all that much that would make a difference. So it's got to be just symbolic. But that's what North Korea does. They're all about symbology, symbolism, and is what the word is I'm looking for, and looking like they're tougher than they are. So I don't think it's really a big issue, but it's more like, what do? We don't want to let them get away with it, thinking that they're big and tough. But I mean, what are you gonna do? Comicbook.com with what I find to be kind of disappointing. Goosebumps author R.L. Stine supports book edits. He's quoted as saying, "You don't want to offend people." Huh. Earlier this year, reports emerged that author R.L. Stine's iconic Goosebumps series of books had earned edits by publisher Scholastic that he wasn't aware of. And while Stine first debunked the notion that he personally rewrote elements of his stories, he more recently addressed that he supports the changes made by the publisher to make the stories more inclusive. After the reports emerged, Scholastic confirmed that the changes to the language had been made years ago and had seemingly gone unnoticed, and that these changes were made in hopes of avoiding any language that could negatively impact young readers. Stein is quoted as saying, "They update things all the time. I was surprised, but it was good because you don't want to offend people. People are a lot more sensitive now and a lot more aware of things in these books. I definitely don't want to offend anybody. I want to be careful, although I don't want to be too careful, of course. Well, that's a tough line to take, Mr. Stein, because art is art, and you should always be able to stand by your art, even if it's behind the times or it's old fashioned or it's a reflection of the times that it was produced in. A disclaimer is fine. Like Disney is full of disclaimers in front of almost all of their movies these days. Their older ones saying, "Oh yeah, they're stereotypes. They were wrong then, they're wrong now, but we've left them in for historical accuracy." And you know what? That's kind of the right way to do it. If you have an opinion on it and you don't think they're appropriate, say so, but leave them in. Let people decide for themselves. I mean, I know some things are going to be offensive. I get it, but where do we stop being offended? You know what I mean? Anyway, CBS News. The Rolling Stones say making music is no different than it was decades ago. Quote, "We just let it rock on." And that's, actually making the stuff. Yeah, it's really not different. You catch a hook, you catch a melody, you make something catchy or something that you like, or use something you think other people will like, and you just roll with it. Success is a whole other story, though. But I don't think he's addressing that, or they really. I don't think they're addressing that. I think they're just talking about going out there and just playing and making music. And I support that. I mean, I don't listen to the Rolling Stones. I've have maybe a handful of their music, and I like the songs that other people have covered of theirs more than I like them. But I can respect that they're still around after everything that they have done to their bodies, and they're still alive, still doing their thing. Good for them, I suppose. Good for them. IGN. The internet is divided on Rick and Morty's new voices, especially certain characters. Now, if you remember, Justin, I think Roiland, I think that's how you say his last name, was caught up in some kind of a scandal, some kind of sexual scandal thing that the charges got dropped and dismissed and things like that. So he ended up walking away without any sort of issue. But as is usually the case these days, the trend, you could say, before all of that came to an end, he was cut off from everything that he did. He had to step away from his shows, his game studio, like everything. So I don't watch Rick and Morty, but I know his voice because I played the game High on Life, and so I know his voices and things. He was heavily involved in that. But I don't watch Rick and Morty. But supposedly they have sound-alikes, they say, replacing the main characters who were voiced by Roiland. And this was the first time that they've been. This is the first season where they're active and he's not. So apparently, and it was never going to be quite the same. It never is. No matter how close a person sounds, it's never going to be quite the same. So I'm interested, but I also don't care because I don't watch Rick and Morty. So, but if you have an opinion on this particular situation, then by all means, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the new voices versus the old voices. CBS News, if you want to know, here are the top 10 most popular Halloween candies according to Instacart. And I am not going to go through that list, but if you want to know, like I said, go to CBS News and they'll tell you. Smithsonian Magazine, with a slightly clickbaity title, says this 21-year-old used AI to decipher text from a scroll that hasn't been read in 2,000 years. And while the title is kind of like, it is kind of cool. And hopefully it's accurate. AI, as I've mentioned many times on this show in the past, has not been very impressive to me to this point. but there are certain applications where it seems to shine, and with luck, it's shown here. I'm gonna wait for the story to develop a little bit and see how far along they get with it before I dive in. But that's a cool story. Two stories back to back that are related, both from ABC News. The first, quote, acute security threats, unquote, preventing U.S. from aiding Americans at the Rafah crossing, which I assume is a crossing out of Gaza. And that's unfortunate. I understand the position, though, considering that there's a massive buildup of militants and weapons all along that area. Not just, of course, from the Hamas side, because they launched their initial attack. And I'm sure they wouldn't have done that if they weren't fully prepared for the backlash. And Israel also moving many, many, many more weapons in there in opposition. So I can understand that that's very difficult. And I hope if anyone here who has there or family members or anything like that and you're concerned, I hope things go well for you. I certainly do. Second story, also from ABC News, a downer. 30 Americans now confirmed dead in Israel. And the thing about it was that it was a music festival, I guess, one of the things that got attacked. And there were people from all over that were killed or maimed in that attack. So that is very unfortunate. Developing story continues to develop. Reuters, Netflix may hike prices after successive password sharing crackdown. That's just kind of kicking people while they're down, don't you think? Because they said after they adjusted their things and started cracking down on password sharing, they had a record number of signups, like huge amounts of people signing up for their own accounts. So, strategy worked, right? Oh, but of course, now that we have all these new customers, let's squeeze them a little bit. Let's squeeze them a little bit. And they've already hiked their prices twice. Just in the last 5 or 6 years alone. As far as I'm aware. Because my prices with Netflix have gone up twice. Maybe it's closer to 9 years. I don't know. It's since my daughter started watching TV. Because we didn't watch much of it before she came along. At least I didn't, anyway. So this is just, like I said, it's just kicking people while they're down. It's not really appropriate. But whatever. They're going to do it whether we like it or not. I already know that. WWG with some good news for some classic Nintendo console players. Analog 3D announced a new console designed to play Nintendo 64 games in 4K. Ooh, doesn't that sound cool? Will Nintendo shut it down or will they endorse it? That's the ticket. That is the ticket here. Because if it's designed specifically for that console rather than just one of those Retron things where they take all kinds of consoles, Nintendo's going to probably be Nintendo. But who knows? We'll keep an eye on it. It might be cool. Depends on the price, in my case. I never played a Nintendo 64. Personally, I never had one. Other people did, but I didn't. ABC News, again, with more to the story, and I don't want to keep beating it into your heads about this. This is why I had a day or so off not too long ago from the news, because it's just everywhere. No ceasefire agreed, Netanyahu's office says. And I don't know where the rumors came from that they had agreed on a ceasefire, because nothing of the sort has come up anywhere else. People are still shooting at each other, bombing each other, all that good stuff. And it's a long way from being finished. And once again, I don't want to continue going on and on about this story every news day, but it is something that's happening currently. So it's one of those things can't get away from. Washington Post World was something that kind of gets me a little wound. U.S. to ease sanctions on Venezuelan oil for freer presidential election. And this gets me wound up because this is pure manipulation in another country's politics. Because it was partially in part due to our sanctions, which happened during the Trump administration, that that their economy collapsed and completely blew up. It was our fault. It was the United States' not entirely 100%. Man, we gave them that big shove, and we definitely pushed them over the edge. And I didn't realize that we were still keeping the screws tight up till now. And now you got Biden in there, and this would have been a good move. It would have been good optics for him to just ease the sanctions for the good of the Venezuelan people. Because maybe that would convince some of them not to come here anymore and stay in their country because their economy would get better. That's what you want to do, right? You want the other countries to get better so that they can take care of their own people, right? But instead, we're going to trade it to them to force them to change up their elections. Like, come on. We caused the problem. In part, in a large part. And now we're going to be like, oh yeah, we'll take it back, but only if you do this. Oh. And I get that we want to be the beacon of the free world and everybody deserves free elections and all that other kind of stuff. But it's another country's business. Leave them alone. It gets me wound up. I get so steamed about it. I've been reading about this story. I read about it yesterday, is when it first came up, and man, I've been on a tear about it ever since. Because I watched in real time when the news came flooding in about the Venezuelan economy and how destitute it was, and they didn't even have basic utilities and all kinds of stuff. And man, we just keep sticking our finger in that pie and just swirling it around. Grinds me up. Reuters, and I knew this was still going on. I didn't think it was stopped, but I hadn't seen any stories about it. Ford Union of Auto Workers leaders spar as auto strike costs rise. And yeah, the strike is still going on. I can't imagine that they're going to get what they're asking for. I don't know if they've changed their demands because, again, the stories haven't come up. And Reuters, of course, is paywalled, so I can't check there. But they wanted a 46% raise across the board. They wanted a 32-hour work week, but to be paid for 40. And they wanted something else. And man, it's not realistic. And here we are weeks later, and it's still going on. No surprise there. No surprise there. This whole thing is going to drag on and on and on and on and on. And then I don't know what's going to happen from there. They're going to strike some kind of deal that nobody likes on either side, but they don't have a choice. That's what I think. The Verge with more news from Netflix. Netflix tests streaming games to US TVs to take on PlayStation and Xbox. And I have to wonder, what kind of games? Amazon is playing around with game streaming, but then Amazon has access to stuff you get on PC. Like they got all kinds of stuff. They got MMOs and all kinds of things like that. Whereas everybody else, what are you doing? Like it's mostly mobile games that have been adapted to television or to like big screens. I don't want to play any of that. I'll keep my Xbox. Thanks, Netflix. I'll keep my Xbox. Not going to switch over to Netflix gaming anytime soon. Popular science with potentially troubling news. China says it discovered potentially vast amounts of a rare superconducting material. And on the one hand, I'm not surprised. On the other hand, I'm suspicious. Because China is the leader in semiconductor materials, which is why we had so many shortages, because China was like, oh, we're not going to send anybody anything. Or we're locked down for the virus, so we can't send anybody anything. And they started stockpiling it, hoarding it. And now everybody in the world is hurting for semiconductor materials and chips and things for their smart vehicles. And now they say they have this huge amount, which will make people rely on them even more. And I'm kind of like, I'm not feeling it. We need to find an alternative. We got to find something else outside of China. For sure. I don't like having to keep rely on China for everything. It bugs me. It bugs me. Associated Press, in Brazil's Amazon, rivers fall to record low levels during drought, and that is certainly a problem. Droughts are serious business, and we've had a lot of those. In weird places, though. I get it in the Amazon if the river level goes down. Having a drought in California kind of makes no sense, because you could pump in seawater and be clarified and get the salt out of it. It's expensive, but it can be done. But they won't, for some reason. Even though there's huge amounts of water out there that obviously isn't really going down that much. Whatever. If you hear click, 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 clacking, that's the dog running circles in the kitchen. Because she gets all this nervous energy and she doesn't know what to do with it, because she's mostly blind, she's mostly deaf, she can't just go out and run around, she gets too nervous, she gets dirty, and she scratches herself, so she just turns and runs circles in the kitchen. And now she's knocking something over, so I gotta carry you guys in here. She's tripping over something. So this is the live life with me. You're not hearing this live, of course, but this is what it's like. Washington Post says Poland election results favor the opposition in a political earthquake. And they did claim victory a day or so ago. So now, looks like they're going to win. I don't know what the opposition, like what their political affiliation is. Like every time I've read the story, it's been from Washington Post, and they won't let me read the article unless I pay a premium. So I'll have to look that up and get back to you guys probably tomorrow. I'll probably double check on that and do some research. Let's see. Associated Press again. Wisconsin Supreme Court asked to draw new legislative boundaries over Republican objections. Will they do it? It's a good question. Who is asking, by the way? Let me take a look. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Democratic voters in Wisconsin, hoping to undo Republican-drawn legislative district maps, told the liberal-controlled state Supreme Court on Monday that it should create new maps by March, forcing every lawmaker to stand for election under redrawn lines in 2024. The current maps are unsalvageable, attorneys for the voters argued. But Republicans who control the legislature countered that Democrats were exercising raw political power and trying to take advantage of the new liberal majority on the court to overturn its ruling that adopted the current maps. And this here has been the battleground as far as politics goes. Really, the battleground has been, man, that cat never shuts up. But battleground now, if you can't win local elections has been to redraw all of the lines to force elections until you do win. And both sides have been doing this, and it's getting kind of tiresome. And I'll tell you, I mean, I don't think every single time that a majority wins, it's gerrymandering, which is what gets claimed all the time. But some places look really suspect. You look at Ohio and you look at some of our maps, the newest maps actually look pretty decent. They look pretty even. And it's a complaint because Democrats don't like it because it says it's disenfranchising voters or something like that. But they look pretty equal. Whereas before, you had all these weird, like, thin, curvy districts all over the place, and it didn't look right. They look better now. But they don't want districts based on just block, 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 block. They want it based on demographics, and they want this, and they want this, and they want representation here and here and here, and none of that is realistic. None of that is realistic. So you're not making it even, you're just lopsiding it in different ways. But that's how people win elections these days. By playing around with the district maps. So we'll see how this story goes. This is something I'm kind of interested in, even though it's in Wisconsin, not here. But I am interested. The Verge, if you use WhatsApp, it turns on passwordless logins with passkeys for Android users. I don't use WhatsApp. I don't care. Not of interest to me. But if it is of interest to you, by all means. Despite the fact that passwords are really not that as insecure as they say. The reason people get into all these things is because people leave their passwords in places where they're easily found. They put them places where they shouldn't. It's not that they're always hacked all the time. It's that they're not being safe with their passwords. I can count the number of times any of my social anything started sending people spam messages on one hand. It's been maybe twice. And that was just clicking on a bad link here and there and not thinking straight. But recovering quick enough that I was able to change my password. Nobody stole my accounts or anything. My email once started sending spam, changed the password, done deal. My Facebook once started sending spam, changed the password, done deal. Haven't had a problem since. And that's over the course of, 20 years. So passwords are not that insecure. And the final story for tonight, not tonight, today, I always do that. I always make that mistake. Maybe next spring, when it starts to be brighter in the morning, I'll get this figured out. PBS NewsHour. House of Representatives enters third week without speaker as GOP infighting keeps Congress at standstill. They've got too many sides, too many little groups, too many caucuses, which is what both parties do wrong. You shouldn't have these little separate groups. If you're going to be a political party, it's that party. If you don't agree with what your party's doing, make your own party. Don't have little factions inside the party. If you can't change it from within, then don't declare yourself, we're the whatever caucus, we're the whatever caucus, and we're this caucus, and we're going to do this. Don't just make your own party and be done with it. Okay? You want to have political power, just do that. All of this is just a waste of time. All of it's just a waste of time. Here's a fun one, though. I want to do this one more. Pfizer's C19 shot outlook cuts hit other vaccine maker shares. Ooh, boy. They're having to cut their manufacturing for their shots because nobody wants them anymore. And that's spreading to the other manufacturers. Nobody wants them. Nobody needs them. People are getting their natural immunity. They've got their initial shots, and they don't need 3 shots every year. They don't. They don't need that many boosters. It's all done with. Nobody cares. Move on. The virus days are over. Move on. Okay? Apathy has won. I'm not going to say we won, we defeated, whatever. It's apathy, because that's what sets in after a long enough time of the same thing. People get tired of it. People get bored of it. Nobody cares about the virus anymore. See you later. That's all. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, veiled insults, or threats within reason, drop me a comment on YouTube on this video, or send me an email at uncannyspiritsclub@gmail.com. I would love to hear you. I would love to hear your opinion on some of these things that we've talked about this morning, and on any of the stories that I've talked about over the last month or so, or longer. But until then, I want fancy breakfast. I want some fancy breakfast. We're going to make some eggs Benedict today. Fancy breakfast with the English muffins, the Canadian bacon, the eggs, the hollandaise sauce. Yeah, we're going to go all that. Okay? You better have the ingredients. Okay? If you don't, we're going to have to go to the store, and they better be open. Not much is open this hour, but we'll have to wait, and I'm going to get hungry. So you're going to owe me that breakfast. Okay? Eggs Benedict. That's what we're doing. Even the dog's upset about it. Let's do it.